Fellow tennis nerds, I wanted to talk about the best rackets of 2024 according to Tennis Warehouse sales numbers as well. It was quite interesting to see the top 5 list. Not really shocking, but I wanted to comment a bit on it as well because there are reasons for these rackets being extremely popular in 2024. We have so many releases coming up 2025 in a few weeks. You will be able to purchase these rackets. You have a bunch of them on the bed behind me here. Pure drives, new Clash, new Technifiber T-Fight, new Hazel rackets, new Head Gravity, new Dunlop SX, new Solinko V2 White Out, and yeah, much more. So there will be loads and loads of rackets, tough to choose, but 2024 had these rackets as their favorites by Tennis Warehouse sales numbers. And not a shock to see the Wilson Blade 98 1619 on number 1 there. They have a lot of ambassadors: Stefanos Tsitsipas, Ugo Humbert, Karen Khachanov, and Alex Deminar. There's so many players playing with the Blade cosmetic. They might be using something slightly different underneath the cosmetic, as you know, but there are a lot of blades on the market. Arina Sabalenka, to mention her as well, she plays 1820 though, but there's so many blades out there, and having pro players endorse your racket makes a lot of sense financially if you can afford it, because people will buy more rackets then. Compared to the V8, it wasn't really like a big difference in terms of playability. I felt like it was a bit more muted, perhaps a tad more forgiving, and had better quality control, which was maybe the main thing for me, that all the Blade V9s I got were pretty much on spec. So if that was the intention from Wilson to actually improve their quality control in terms of specifications, I applaud that, because that was important. Second on the list, my racket of choice currently, we will see if it changes at some point with all these new rackets that I'm testing at the moment, the ATP Pure Arrow 98, the one that is endorsed and used by Carlos Alcaraz, Holger Rune, Arthur Fils. We don't know if they use the VS layup, which is a little bit stiffer. That was the previous generation, but they are quite close. The 98 being a bit more soft in feel and my preferred choice there. But this one is ultra popular for a reason. It's a very good racket. You're going to get a lot of lift on the ball, but you still have some control from the 1620 pattern. It definitely rewards faster swings, so you need to attack the ball, you need to swing quite fast. If you start slowing down, there is a risk of the ball sailing. You're going to get more control than with like the Blade, for example, out of these two. But this one has a bit more of a modern feel to it, modern performance in terms of more spin, more power than the Blade. The Blade is still a little bit of an old school control racket in many ways, but it's trying to bridge that gap into the modern. But two great rackets, I can understand why they're there. Same with number 3, the Onx Eone 98, one of my favorites as well. The 100 is great too, as you know, was my racket of choice for a while. The Aqua Night, when they released that, I think a lot of people wanted like a dark black cosmetic, and this one looked great. It played a little bit stiffer, according to Nikki, who plays with the Eone 98, and I would say the same. It felt a little bit stiffer due to the paint change, which does affect sometimes the racket, how it plays. It definitely affects the strings. So maybe a little bit firmer, but overall, like, great frame. A modern frame gives you power, but a lower trajectory than the Aero 98, which has a lot of lift and launch on the ball. So the Eone 98 used by many pros like Naomi Osaka, Nick Kyrgios, whenever he's coming back, probably now in Brisbane, and a bunch of others that I can't think of right now, Martin Fucsovic, and so many players. The Eone is such a popular frame on the tour for good reason. It's a modern frame, like the Arrow and the Eone. They're more modern, more power oriented, and the Blade is a bit more control oriented. Another frame that was not a shock to me is number 4, the Head Speed MP. It is Head's best-selling line, and they have some strong players endorsing it in Novak Djokovic and Jannik Sinner, to mention the two main names there. And it's obviously a very versatile frame. It has some spin, it has some power, it has pretty good touch. The thing this year was that they had like that soft touch paint, which some liked, some didn't. But overall, this is just like a stellar performer. The Oxetic 2 brought a bit more dampening, brought a bit more of a softer feel to the speed, which many liked. It's a great frame, and I definitely can see it being on the top 5 list of the best-selling rackets. Really found it to be a good one. If you want more control, from a tighter string pattern, you go with the Speed Pro. It's the 1820 version. Then we had a huge release from Wilson, of course, being the RF line. Together with Roger Federer, they released this line, and the RF Pro is Roger's racket of choice if you would play exhibitions or go back on tour, which is unlikely today. So this is a racket developed together with Roger, and it's a good racket. It's not the most forgiving one, I've said that many times, but I do meet players that play with this one and they really love it. It's a little bit easier to use than the RF97 Autograph, which so many like because of its like heft, great stability, plow through. This one has a little bit lack of that, but it's a bit more of a modern weapon. You can swing it a bit faster, and it's I think overall a more modern approach to that control precision frame, but you get some pop on it because it is a bit firmer. And the sweet spot, though, not super generous on this one. So not really shocking to see these rackets. It would be interesting to follow the RF racket journey now as they've released it. Then it kind of obviously dies down a bit. There's so many rackets coming out. Can they keep the interest using Roger's name and using Roger as an ambassador when he's not playing? That will be quite interesting. I'm sure we will see these rackets do well also in 2025, but there are loads of releases, as I said. Just like in January, we have like 5-6 racket releases from all manufacturers. We can also briefly look at the strings from Tennis Warehouse best-selling list. Not that surprising either, with the two ultra popular but firm strings there, so I would really advise most rec players not to play with these strings. The RPM Blast and the Lux Lonale Power, they're very firm. They don't hold tension that long, and they play great for 1, 2, 3 hours, and then they usually drop quite drastically. And great for the pros and endorsed by the pros, used by the pros. That's why people buy them. But I think there are more arm-friendly, more easy-to-use alternatives that gives you a bit more power and stuff. If you're going to use these, I would string them a little bit lower if you're a club level player. If you're a very advanced player, of course, go ahead. But remember that these strings drop quite quickly, so you would need to restring them often. But maybe if you're playing pro, you're going to get new rackets for every practice. But the pros play a different game than we do, so good to keep that in mind. Nice to see VS Touch still going strong. It's also kind of a pro-endorsed, pro-used string, being natural gut, still being super popular in hybrids among many younger and older ATP pros. So natural gut still going strong, still the best tension maintenance, excellent feel. It's hard to mimic that with a multi-filament, but on number 5 here, the NRG2 from Technofiber, that is as close as you can get, you could argue. It has received raving reviews. It's a very good multi, but not quite on par with natural gut in terms of tension, maintenance, and feel. But we have a polyester string, the famous Hyper G, that neon green one that's now available from all brands in some form, that color. But when it came out in 2015, it was quite unique. And it's still very popular. You're seeing it everywhere. It's one of my favorite strings, and it deserves a place there. Solinco has a few other strings. They are of similar fame, like the Solinco Torbite. So not shocking. Nice to see natural gut. A bit surprised to see NRG2, although I know it's a great multi, but it's nice to see that multis are still being sold. And there's two strings that maybe a small percentage should use are the best-selling strings, and then there you see how important it is for marketing of strings. So I hope that you consider softer string alternatives if you have any kind of arm issues and if you're not hitting that hard, because these strings will force you to restring a bit more often, even if they don't break. All right, so those are the best-selling rackets and strings, and you got a little bit of idea there, and not shocking. Put your thoughts in the comments about these lists, but also which racket you are most interested in from the new batch of frames coming out in January. That's it for today. Have a nice day, and don't forget to play some tennis.